Hello, everyone. It's Fred again from Notes of a Nomad, video number 99. A year ago, I did video number 47. It was a little bit about Thunder Bay and the fact that I moved away and the result of moving so much. Today, I'd like to go into more detail about the first 13 and a half years of my life that I spent in Thunder Bay and also share some impressions that I have about Thunder Bay because it is a different community than most. It is very isolated in Northern Ontario. And Thunder Bay has approximately 110,000 people living there. And when I lived there, it was two cities. It was Port Arthur and Fort William, and they amalgamated and named it Thunder Bay around 1970. Now, I lived in Port Arthur, and I went to a school called Shunya School. There's a badge still from the elementary school I went to from grade 1 to grade 8. And I then started high school and left after about 2/3 of the year in 1956 when my dad was transferred to Vancouver, working for the grain elevators. Now, as I said, it's isolated. So a lot of people don't leave. All my relatives are still there. None of them have left. I'm the only one who sort of escaped. And that seems to be the trend. The population isn't growing that much. In fact, I believe it's declined in the past decade. I guess there's not a lot of activity there, business and so on, although it's mainly a port for the St. Lawrence Seaway, and any goods coming from the prairies like the wheat is still being shipped and some other minerals, etc., because there is a lot of mining in that area as well, plus forestry. There's a lot of pulp and paper mills and lumber mills in the area as well. So that is the main area, our business other than government, and that is probably the main hub for the provincial government for Northern Ontario. And as I said, it's isolated. It's about 1,400 kilometers to Toronto. If you want to go west, the next big city is Winnipeg. That's 700 kilometers. And the closest city of any size, of similar size, is Duluth, Minnesota, which is about 300 kilometers along the shore of Lake Superior. And that is where I first found ice cream shops. Didn't have ice cream shops when I grew up in Thunder Bay. We used to get ice cream in a quart box, and they would scoop it out of the big tub and fill it up for, I think, 25 cents. That was my big treat. Duluth is where I first saw, with wide eyes, an ice cream shop. So being so isolated and people not leaving very often, there's a few characteristics about Thunder Bay. One is probably not the best, it has a very high crime rate, apparently. It's known as the sort of homicide capital of Canada for many years. I don't know if it still holds that title, but it's up there. So crime is rampant. In fact, there's a podcast that I listened to a few years ago when I was in Australia called, I think, Return to Thunder Bay, where the whole series about the corrupt officials and lawyers in Thunder Bay. And that's fascinating, but maybe not the best claim to fame. If you should visit Thunder Bay, there's a few places you may go, and I'll start by sharing my screen. The first picture I have is actually the flag of Thunder Bay, and the green on here is the sleeping giant, which I spoke about in video number 47, the Ojibwe legend about the giant who sort of looks after the, it was hiding from the silver mines, etc., that were on that peninsula. Anyway, that is part of the flag. And if we start looking at, are there any famous people from Thunder Bay? I looked at a long list. There's a lot of hockey players, but the only person that I recognized was Paul Schaefer, who was the sidekick on the Late Show for many years when David Letterman did the Late Show. So he's probably the most famous person from Thunder Bay that I could find on the list. There's a few politicians, but none of them I recognize. So the only one I recognized was Paul Schaefer. Now, if you visit, one of the areas that a lot of people talk about is the Terry Fox Monument, which is on the highway into Thunder Bay. Terry Fox is a very famous Canadian. In most school children know him because they run marathons to raise money to fight cancer. And Terry Fox had cancer, lost part of his right leg, and started a marathon on the East Coast in St. John's, Newfoundland, in the Atlantic Ocean, and got as far as this part on the highway to Thunder Bay when he had to stop because cancer caught up with him once again. And so there's that monument. Another item that or place you might visit is the Hoito Restaurant. Now it's in the Finnish Labor Temple. And this building was built, I think, in 1910, and the Hoito Restaurant started in 1918, when some of the people working in the bush camps said, particularly the Finns who worked in the bush camps, said they can find a place to sleep when they go to town, but not a place to eat at a good price. And so they started a cooperative restaurant, which ran for over 100 years, from 1918 to 2020, when COVID-19 closed it down. And this building was being renovated. And there's a picture of the Hoito Restaurant entrance, which is in the bottom level of the Finnish Labor Temple. But what happened recently was what's made me think of doing this video. Now, I recall, I think it was in 2008, I visited the Hoito Restaurant, and I took away this souvenir placemat, and it tells you the history about the building and why and how the restaurant started. And on the other side was some of the menu, such as Finnish wieners and fried Finnish sausages, also salted fish, and some other items that I cannot pronounce because it's in Finnish. But the one item that outstanding for me is the blueberry pie. Now, it reminds me of my mother's blueberry pie because it is made with wild blueberries. And we used to go blueberry picking, and these taste, even though I think it was 50 years later, I went in, had blueberry pie, and I said, oh my gosh, this reminds me of my mother's blueberry pie. It is so delicious. So that was the best thing on the menu for me, was the blueberry pie at the Hoito Restaurant. Now, what happened a week ago, which is what prompted this video, was that the Finnish Labor Temple was destroyed by fire. It was, as it says, December the 23rd, 2021. And the Hoito Restaurant is in the downstairs of that building. And you can see the next picture, the cupola, as it's called at the top, has collapsed from the fire, and there's the entrance to the Hoito Restaurant. So that is what prompted this video. When I heard about the Hoito Restaurant, made me start thinking about growing up in Thunder Bay with the Finns, etc. On the street that I lived on, I was with a lot of Finnish youngsters. I learned how to swear in Finn. The only one word I remember, which isn't a swear word, is istu, which means to sit down, because there was a 5-year-old youngster who was from a Finnish household. And I think it was Havarnens, and he couldn't speak English. And I said I'd pull him in his wagon behind my bicycle. And with that, I would tell him istu, he would sit down, and I'd ride up and down the street, pulling him in his wagon. So with that, I'll say adios, au revoir, wishing you, your family, and friends lots of love and laughter. Until next time, bye for now. Fred, the Notes of a Nomad.